Welcome back to 504 Road Trips. In today's New Orleans neighborhood tour, we'll be driving around the French Quarter. We'll be using a different format in this video than we've used in previous tours, as well as a new camera. This will be a real-time video with only long stops edited out. This will be like a real drive around the French Quarter. You'll experience the sights and sounds as if you were really there. The only thing we can't reproduce is the smell, and you can thank us for that. There's an index in the description below in case you want to jump around. On the right is the upscale Shops at Canal Place and the Canal Place office tower, constructed in the late 1970s. This area was once part of the river, but the force of the Mississippi's waters caused the river to creep eastward towards Algiers Point, and this became dry land. We turn right onto North Peter Street and enter the French Quarter. The French Quarter, also known as the Vieux Carré, is the oldest section of the city of New Orleans. Most of the surviving historical buildings were constructed in either the late 18th century during the city's period of Spanish rule or during the first half of the 19th century after U.S. annexation and statehood. The district as a whole has been designated as a National Historic Landmark, with numerous contributing buildings that are separately deemed significant. It is both a prime tourist destination and attractive for local residents. Here, North Peter Street merges with Decatur Street for 5 blocks. Ahead on the right is the old Jackson Brewery, or Jack's Brewery to locals. This was one of 2 brewing locations for Jack's beer from 1890 to 1974. At its height, it was the largest brewery in the southern United States and the 10th largest brewery in the nation. In the 1980s, the brewery was renovated and converted into a shopping mall and is currently a historic landmark housing restaurants, apartments, and entertainment venues. It was officially named Jackson Brewery due to its proximity to Jackson Square ahead on the left. Jackson Square was declared a National Historic Landmark in 1960 for its central role in the city's history and as the site where in 1803 Louisiana was made United States territory pursuant to the Louisiana Purchase. On the other side of Jackson Square, out of camera range, is the St. Louis Cathedral, the oldest cathedral in the United States. We'll see a side view of that later in this video. On the right is the famous Café du Monde, where you can sit down for an order of café au lait and beignets. Café du Monde was established in 1862. We're once again on North Peters Street as we veer away from Decatur Street and we enter the French Market. Founded as a Native American trading post predating European colonization, the market is the oldest of its kind in the United States. Throughout most of its history, individual vendors purveyed many different fresh foods, including raw seafood, through the mid-20th century. Much of this end of the French market has been converted to enclosed restaurants, cafes, and retail shops, but as we approach the downriver end, it's still open air and serves as a flea market. Now we're near the end of the quarter, and we'll head back towards Canal and Decatur Street. This street is lined with shops, bars, and restaurants. Most notable on this block is the Palm Court Jazz Cafe on the left. On the left in this small park is the golden Joan of Arc statue, and just ahead on the right, hidden behind the awnings, is Central Grocery and Deli, where the muffaletta sandwich was invented in the early 1920s by the Sicilian proprietor. The muffaletta sandwich consists of a large round loaf, soft on the inside with a crunchy crust on the outside. Inside are Italian cold-cut Swiss and provolone cheese and a heap of Italian olive salad. There are a number of places where you can buy a muffaletta, but very few of those places get it right. On the right at the corner of Madison is Two Jacks Restaurant, which has been serving seafood and Creole cuisine since 1856. This will be another slow section of road due to all the foot and horse traffic as we cross Jackson Square again. It's nearing 11 a.m. on a Saturday and the French Quarter is coming to life. On the right, as we pass this fire truck, you can catch a glimpse of an ancient advertisement for ginger mint julep painted on the side of a building next to the New Orleans Fire Department Station number 29. The ad is said to have been painted in the 1920s. On the left is the old United States Custom House, completed in 1881. It now houses the Audubon Butterfly Gardens and Insectarium. Now we'll head up Canal to Chartres Street and back across the French Quarter. The building that takes up the entire block on the left was home to the Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries Agency for much of the 20th century. Since its renovation and reopening in 2004, it has housed the Louisiana Supreme Court. On the right is what was once an apothecary back in the early 1800s and is now the New Orleans Pharmacy Museum. We arrive at the St. Louis Cathedral in the back of Jackson Square, and since we can't drive through here, we'll detour a couple of blocks and come back to Chartres Street. On the left is Pat O'Brien's, home of the Hurricane Cocktail. Now we get to see a couple of blocks of Bourbon Street. Due to a road construction project, it wasn't possible to drive the entire length of Bourbon Street, and we can only drive this section because it's still early in the day, as it becomes a pedestrian mall after a certain hour. This looks much different in the evening and into the early morning. This stretch of Bourbon Street is home to the world-famous Cat's Meow, Tropical Isle, and the Oz nightclubs, as well as Marie Laveau's House of Voodoo. As we travel down St. Anne Street, on the left is the building used for exterior shots on the TV show NCIS New Orleans. On the right is the old Ursuline Convent, which is now a museum, and St. Mary's Catholic Church. While there are still shops, restaurants, and hotels, there are fewer bars and nightclubs and more residences here. We hit Esplanade Avenue, the end of the French Quarter, and drive up to Royal Street for our next pass. The first few blocks of Royal Street are mostly residential, so this is a quiet area. After crossing St. Philip Street, we get back into the commercial area. The rest of Royal Street has hotels, antique stores, jewelry stores, art galleries, restaurants, and other retail establishments, but very few bars. Like Bourbon Street, Royal becomes a pedestrian mall after a certain time of the day. At St. Louis Street, we begin to see famous New Orleans restaurants, including Antoine's, Court of Two Sisters, Royal House, Brennan's, and Mr. B's Bistro. We turn up Canal Street and we're going to skip Bourbon because of the construction project. We'll take Burgundy up to Esplanade. This is referred to as the upper quarter, and unlike everything else we've seen, this entire street is mostly residential with the exception of a few corner bars and a couple of hotels. As we make the right turn onto Dauphine Street, we can see Port of Call, a dive bar and restaurant with what, in my opinion, is the best hamburger available anywhere. There's often a line of people out the door waiting to get in. With only a few exceptions, Dauphine Street is entirely residential until we get close to Canal Street. The final leg of our trip will be up Rampart Street, which is the northwestern border of the French Quarter. Along the left lanes here is the newest streetcar line in New Orleans. On the left at Canal Street is Our Lady of Guadalupe Chapel and the International Shrine of St. Jude. This church, built in 1826, is the oldest surviving church building in New Orleans. Between St. Peter and St. Philip Streets on the left is Armstrong Park and the Mahalia Jackson Theater for the Performing Arts. On the right at the corner of Ursulines Avenue is WWL-TV Studios. We conclude our video here at the corner of North Rampart and Esplanade. We hope you enjoyed this neighborhood tour, and if you did, please give us a thumbs up, comment below, subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified when new videos come out, share and follow us on social media, and join us for our next 504 road trip.